very warm welcome to IDFC First Bank presents Leaders of Tomorrow Season 13. I'm Ritwika Gupta and you're watching highlights from our recently concluded Leaders of Tomorrow Season 13 awards. Today's focus is on artificial intelligence and climate, starting with AI. What happens when curiosity meets conviction at a very young age? We're going to explore what drives a young AI founder and the bigger question of where India stands in the global AI race with Raul John Aju, founder and CTO, Alrealm Technologies. In the second segment, we answer if climate can become a competitive advantage for India's MSMEs in a panel discussion with Sumaira Abdulali, Environmentalist, Manvendra Singh Shekhawat, founder Dhun, Suryagarh Collection, and Amit Prothi, Director General Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. So ladies and gentlemen, for those who are not aware, this young chap who's sitting next to me, he built his first humanoid robot at the age of 12. Now, I don't know what I was doing at the age of 12, definitely not building robots, but that's my first question to you, Raul. Tell me, what were you chasing at that time? Was it just curiosity that led you to, develop your interest in AI, technology, androids? Tell me.
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me here. It means a lot. And about building the humanoid robot, to be honest, I just built it. So I used to take sessions for kids and schools in US online. But their schools start in the morning. Because of the time zone difference, I was like, once I finish teaching them, there needs to be something to answer their doubts. So I created a clone of me, but as a game, through Unreal Engine, through APIs.
You created a clone of yourself?
Yes. So it was as a game first. And then in my school, I saw there was a kid who made a robot. Okay, so when you say hi, it replies hi. So I thought, why not take the brain which I made, a clone of me that talks in my voice, that moves like me, that game, and put it inside a body. So I will have a robot, right? So this is around 3-4 years back. So the main reason I made this robot is so that my life becomes easier so I don't have to be too lazy.
I wish I could make a clone of myself as well. But honestly, tell me, when did AI stopped becoming a hobby, and started becoming something more serious? What led you to, found, AI, Realm Technologies? What was the inspiration behind it?
So I was not all the time interested in AI. Fun fact, I used to do classical dance. I used to run marathons. But then I discovered the technology of during that time through content creation. Plus, what is happening there? So I put an iOS software in my Android, put the latest version, routing it, coding it. So I was like, okay, that is the latest technology. I learned video editing. I learned the peak of what is the current technology. But I was like, what is coming next? So I wanted to figure out a way to edit videos way faster than normally it happens. So I was like, I went to Google like anyone else. I was like, how do I edit videos faster? So I found a tool that edits that video that normally takes 2 months in 2 days. I was like, how is it doing whatever I do?
Can you tell me what that is? Because we also need to edit our videos faster.
Sure. The tool name is Firecut. But that is the point when I discovered that AI, there is something known as AI or something that does things for you way quicker. That is when I got in the world of AI. But yeah, as time went on, events like this, I was able to socialize and learn way, way more. And yeah, that's how I have my company now where I've hired my father.
So tell me something, as a young founder building AI, in India, how do you feel about this space? Do you think young founders in India, they have access to the tools, compute, mentorship, especially when you compare them to the global counterparts?
Sure. So I say this everywhere, okay? India should not join the AI race. It should not, but rather create its own race. The reason I believe is we have our own problems. We should not try to create the next image generator. Everyone agree to that? Right? Not the next ChatGPT. We can try to create something way different. Like, for example, farmers, right? Right now, most of our country's workforce are farmers. And we have already built tools for them. For example, right now, the most problem with farmers is that they have to do a lot of guesswork. Like how much fertilizers they use, how much place do we put fertilizers on, how much water do we use. So there was a company named Fasal in India that created a tool in Bangalore, by the way. So that tells them how much fertilizers to use and where to put fertilizers. And it saved more than 50% water. So we are actually pioneering in a lot of places. I believe more people should know about it. But I believe we should focus on solving real problems and create our own race where others will join. rather than just trying to go behind someone else.
Now, Raul, you built something called Justice Nyay Sathi, and for those who are not aware, Justice is a play on the word justice, and legal AI can be a very complex space to be in. Why do you choose to, deep dive into legal AI, and how did you think so commercially, from a very young age?
One of the tools which I built, how many here people know what is BNS Section 303? I suppose no one. Even I didn't know, okay? But it's our fundamental right and duty to know the basic of our Indian constitution and the basic laws. That is the idea behind why I created Rescue. So this AI will specifically tell you what to do in an emergency situation, because the first 60 seconds in an emergency situation matters a lot. And it will even tell you the right law based on it. So BNS Section 303. And just like Uber, like an aggregator, we connect you to a lawyer. Once we connect you to a lawyer, for lawyers, based on millions of trained cases which we have, it tells them exactly similar cases to a case which they might have, sections that they can use, and how they can win a case, and strategies, sections. So their research, which normally takes 1-2 weeks, can be done literally in 2 hours with the help of the same AI.
A 16-year-old your age, they would be consuming content across platforms. You are building those platforms. Tell me, where does that creator mindset come from?
Okay, so starting with, right now I'm an entrepreneur, right? I create content, but create AI tools, have my own company. But way before when I started, when I say exploring, my father always told me to start, I'm promoting my father a lot, but basically to critically think, ask questions. So during that time, I started content creation. I started by recording inside the bathroom and just showing off my toys. And after that point of time, slowly from creating content to creating videos, I moved on to starting to create editing videos, starting to, this running and all these things. But then I started to create my own company and my own tools. I saw that I can also try to do an impact, right? Age should not be a barrier.
That's very inspiring. Now, Raul, you have also famously hired your own father. Mr. Joseph is also in the audience with us. And that's very interesting because it flips the traditional dynamic. Our show is called Leaders of Tomorrow. Tell me, what have you learned about leadership at such a young age?
Well, okay. So one thing about me is that it was kind of a marketing thing when I said that I hired my father. But more or less, why we work together is I can't ever get the experience that he has through the knowledge, through my phone. Yes, I can gain a lot of knowledge, but never that experience. He has worked in a lot of places. Because of that, I was like, okay, so I should give an opportunity to him as well, right? But about leadership, what I feel is, see, take any people, like even Elon Musk. Mainly what they do is that they might not know in depth about, how a rocket works, how a Tesla works, but they know what's exactly this problem. But what the point I'm coming to is, leaders' work, I feel, is to remove the friction between different people that are working under them. So I feel that's what leaders are supposed to do.
So tell me, Raul, a lot of people, not just entrepreneurs, but even leaders, they feel like AI is going to take up their jobs. AI is going to take up a lot of our day-to-day functions. What is your take on that? Do we need to fear AI, or do we need to work with AI? How does it work,
See, when computers came, everyone was like, okay, I was not born then. This is all based on what my father told me. But during that time, everyone was like, it's going to take our jobs, it's going to do this, it's going to do. Everyone is scared, right? And yes, it took a lot of jobs, again, based on what my father told me. Typewriter jobs, this job. But then, biggest companies in the world right now, Google, Amazon, all these big companies are because of what? Computers. So I believe AI will take a lot of jobs. But just like before, we are going to get a lot of jobs back. As more people starts adopting AI, the job opportunities will automatically start to appear. So we don't have to worry about it.
That's very positive. Tell me, for someone who wants to build something in AI, maybe someone who is maybe not as young as you are, but, because our show is watched by a lot of entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs, what should they keep in mind? Like a checklist, probably they should keep in mind in terms of technicalities. What's your take on that?
One bare truth is that having an AI company is not as profitable as having a normal SaaS company. Everyone thinks AI is the next big thing, let's get into it. It's not, right? If you have an AI company, the profit margin is 30 to 60%. So don't think, AI is something crazy. Don't get into it thinking now it's a money-making machine, right? So if you're having an AI company, you have to do something new. And there are 3 things you should follow. One is, according to me, by the way, is solve real boring problems. Second thing which I would say is AI should not be the product, it should be a feature. Now, my perspective on having an AI company are basically these 3 things.
I didn't want this conversation to get very technical, but since we're talking about technology, what was that one technical complication, if I may say, that you perhaps encountered while building practical AI, and how did you solve it?
Well, I'm in the technical world, so I'll have technical problems every single day. In the world of having, using technology, there'll be a lot of problems. But when I started creating these AI tools to figure out rescue even, it took me 3 years for the Nyaya Sati or Rescue of Justice. Final name, the Project 47X is the code name, but it took me 3 years to figure out how not to make it hallucinate, how to get the accuracy to 87%. We are one of the most accurate AI models. So all these things took me 3 years. It was not just one day getting up, okay, done, right? In the technical landscape, a lot of problems have been there. For example, this rescue. To launch it, we have been looking for servers, right? Hardware is kind of the main issue. And we are looking for investments and servers to fund this as well. And I think that is one of the leading problems because servers are very expensive and figuring that out. Most people get like around 3 lakh credits also from Amazon and Google, which we kind of didn't. So we were looking for other ways to get servers. And me being judged as a kid doesn't help. Yeah. So yeah, there are a lot of things like that, but I feel more of the hardware side is a problem because in the age of AI, you can build anything by just typing, right? But that security side and this hardware side is where the limitation is.
Well, Raul, I think what you're doing is absolutely inspiring and impeccable. Ladies and gentlemen, I think he deserves a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Raul, for your time. I wish we could continue this conversation longer, but we're completely out of time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you.
It's time for a quick break here. We'll be back shortly. Stay tuned. Welcome back to IDFC First Bank Presents Leaders of Tomorrow Season 13. You're watching highlights from our recently concluded Leaders of Tomorrow Awards. In this segment, we bring you a climate-focused panel discussion to understand how climate is redefining the cost curve for India's entrepreneurs. My colleague Pooja Jain brings you this conversation.
All right, and I'm very kicked to join the stage with and share this space with industry experts around a conversation that is, if I can say so myself, oftentimes misunderstood. All right? And there are 2 paradoxes to my mind, and please let me know if you share the same sentiment when it comes to the small business community and climate. The first being that while the small business community is responsible for upwards of 45% of manufacturing output in this country, depending on what figures you believe, its carbon footprint or it's responsible for less than 5% of the nation's emissions. I think that's the first very staggering statistic. And the second is that while the MSME community is particularly vulnerable to climate change, it's in many cases low on their priority list, if at all. So given the complexities of the current situation, it's only fair that we do a deep dive around the topic. Unfortunately, I'm joined by a a power-packed panel of domain experts to help me do just that. So, Sumaira, if I could kick off the conversation with you. Experts seem to believe that if our adaptation around climate change is inadequate, let's just call it that for lack of a better word, then India's GDP stands to drop by as much as 10 to 15%. How much truth is there to that statement? And why is it that in spite of that, the small business community does more or less not look at climate action as a top priority or a core survival metric, if you will?
It's a very interesting question because most MSMEs are just struggling to survive,
Exactly.
They are doing what they have to do. They don't have that much money. They don't have that much support. And they are given these ideological goals that you should do this and you should do that. But the question really is how. It depends on what kind of support they get from governments. And it depends on the environment surrounding them, what other MSMEs are doing. So when you have a situation where basically we want the cheapest of everything at all times, and government policy, which is great on paper, does not enforce those laws on the ground, then you have a situation where everybody is trying to find the loopholes. And those loopholes are what are killing not only the MSMEs themselves, because they're creating very difficult situations in which to work, whether it's the effect of climate events like floods and heat waves and other things which reduce the productivity of those MSMEs, or it's the fact that all of us live in this city of Mumbai where we are choking ourselves to death, so to speak. So I'll just leave it there for now, and I'm sure we'll have...
No, thank you. And Sumaira, thank you for adding that color and that candor to the conversation. That's exactly, what we want to hear, the honest opinions and the on-ground realities. And, I'll speak to you now, Manvendra, about climate compliance, because it's such a delicate dance between the compliance and cost equation, right? And MSMEs are in a particularly vulnerable position because they run the risks of infrastructure damage, they run the risk of supply chains coming to a grinding halt, market fluctuations, regulatory uncertainties, and this is just scratching the surface, right? So for MSMEs and our audience that may find themselves in this exact position, how might you guide them? What's the first tangible step that they can take today?
For me, I think it is almost blasphemous to even expect most people who are struggling to solve for today to think about tomorrow, and all of these things I would that they are in that realm. And yet, as you mentioned, that they are the most vulnerable to all impacts. I mean, think about Chennai floods. So I think that till the consumer really understands that the value proposition is far beyond the immediate product that they are buying, and it is the cheapest thing that they want to pursue, this change sadly will not happen. The MSMEs will not have any incentive to do that. They are really operate on very razor thin margins. When you think about climate as an externality, which is, I suppose, the predominant notion, it is not that. Climate is a cost curve. Climate is supply chain risk. Climate is working capital risk. Climate is insurance risk. And if you don't price that risk properly, then we are setting up ourselves for failure. And to expect the MSMEs should start thinking about this it'll not happen. They're too busy solving for today.
I think that also paints a reasonable picture of the on-ground reality. And a critical point that you just made, Manvendra, is that incentivization structures are simply not aligned. But coming to you now, Amit, one scenario in which incentivization structures are perhaps better aligned is in the case of ESG reporting. So all of a sudden, then to have export competitiveness, one needs to inherently, naturally monitor their carbon footprint, right? That's a step in the right direction, but is it the solution?
You talked about extreme heat, you talked about floods, and if you're an SME today, if you're in Delhi and you order on Zomato on a day when it's raining, your delivery doesn't come because the drivers are not driving. MSEs are at the forefront of losing livelihoods because of climatic conditions that are getting exacerbated. What I'm trying to do, so I'm actually sitting in a position where trying to convince governments. So I lead an international organization that has been established by the government of India. It's a coalition of now 65 members, including 53 countries, saying how do we shift the focus on building our infrastructure in a way which is the backbone for making sure disruption of services doesn't happen. Cost of damage. Right. So, what we talk about is we've done a lot of research now. Every year, $800 billion is lost. Just direct damage to infrastructure. And then the economic cost of that, all of the livelihoods lost, adds up to about 7 times that number. That's the number we start to use to then have conversations with government and other actors to say why you need to prioritize understanding your risk. Start looking at your past to see how many times you had to stop your business because there was a flood.
Exactly.
Right? So metrics becomes incredibly important. Data becomes incredibly important. I'm not talking from the carbon side. I'm talking about from the disruption side to say disruption is also an argument, and then it becomes an opportunity. Because if you're today an SMS in that sector which is getting, the supply chains are getting affected, and you can figure out that if my supplier needs something and everybody's lost right now because of a flood, can I be the one who can actually take that as an opportunity to make sure that my supplier gets what I want?
Absolutely. Thank you for setting that context. And you brought up infrastructure, and I'll come to you now, Sumaira, because it's perhaps an unprecedented moment in India's infrastructure growth story, given the scale and the pace of infrastructure development, right? So that said, how can this so-called, climate resilience be built into that moment?
We are facing a great crossroads, an opportunity as well as a crisis. And maybe opportunities come out of crises always. So we want to catch up with the world. We want to build infrastructure which is world-class, but we don't want to spend the money to create the infrastructure and the construction methods which are world-class.
Right.
And this is why we are all suffering, because what we want is aspirational in the future, 40 years from now. But we forget that the mess that we create on the way by overbuilding too quickly without any safeguards is what is going to lead our children perhaps on that path we want, and perhaps on a completely different path, because we are already suffering the health effects of those things. So while, yes, building is great, GDP growth is great, I think we have the opportunity of learning from the mistakes of the West. Today, we have the great opportunity that we do understand the effects that it's going to have. We are facing it already. We are going faster and faster into it. And India, having the brilliant young people, the young minds that we do, have the capability of figuring out new ways of developing which do not repeat the mistakes of the West.
Well, Sumaira, thank you for sharing that. And one final question. And say we nail climate resilience, the small business community nails, climate resilience essentially. How does India stand to benefit? And say we don't, what are the consequences we're ultimately facing?
I think I completely agree with what Madam said, that we know that we need 100 million homes in the next 10 years.
Right.
If we build exactly the same way of building homes, growing food, exactly with the same playbook that has been used thus far, it is going to lead a climate crisis, but more importantly, a human crisis of a proportion that we have not imagined, not only for us, but for the world. And if we do this right, then it is the greatest economic opportunity that is out there. Today, with fusing ancestral intelligence, nature's intelligence, and artificial intelligence or augmented intelligence, we can make regeneration as logical, as scalable, and as profitable as extraction was in the industrial age.
Phenomenal. That makes for a wonderful note upon which to close. It's a much longer conversation and we'll continue it offline. But that said, Sumaira, Manvendra, Amit, huge round of applause for all of you, please.
With that, it's a wrap on this edition of IDFC First Bank Presents Leaders of Tomorrow Season 13. We hope you enjoyed the episode. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.